Hi everyone, happy Friday. Welcome to the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation's Meet the DM Drug Developer Series. It is June 4th and we are here today to hear from Lupin Neurosciences. I am Tanya Stevenson, the CEO at MDF, and I want to just remind you quickly about our mission. Care and a Cure is to enhance the quality of life of people living with myotonic dystrophy and accelerate research focused on finding treatments and a cure. Our work focuses on support and education, research, and advocacy. A reminder of the resources and support opportunities available from our website, which is myotonic.org. You can find our toolkits and publications, including any kind of care resources at myotonic.org/toolkits-publications. That includes our clinical care recommendations. You can also find information about support groups and Facebook chats, our calendar of events and activities, as well as our digital academy. And that's presentations and videos from any of our past events. And today's presentation will be recorded and you will be able to find that on the digital academy, either later today or on Monday. So we have been showing all of our DM Drug Developer series on the first Friday of the month at 12 o'clock Pacific, which we will continue to do through our conference in September. But we do have one bonus presentation on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, June 9th, where we'll be hearing from Artex Biotech. So if you have not signed up for any of these presentations, please do so at myotonic.org/meet-dm-drug-developers. Similarly, our Ask the Expert series is the third Friday of the month at 12 o'clock Pacific. And this month we will be focused on speech, language, and swallowing. So we will have a speech language pathologist talking with us. So register at myotonic.org/ask-expert-series. You can submit all of your questions in advance. So even if you are unable to join the presentation when it's live, you can still send questions in and the presenter will attempt to incorporate answers to those questions into their presentation. We have declared International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day for September 15th. You can learn more about the Global Alliance and how you can get involved at myotonic.org/international-DM-day. And there will be more information added to that site as we get closer to September 15th. As mentioned, today's session will be recorded and posted to the Digital Academy. For those of you who are also attending live right now, you will be sent the recording directly via email. If you have questions about today's presentation, you can contact us at the phone number here or via email at info@myotonic.org. Okay, about today's presenters. Dr. Gregory Kaufman. He is the Senior Vice President of Global Clinical and Medical Affairs Specialty. He oversees the U.S. Medical Affairs and Global Clinical Development and Operations for Lupin. He trained at Johns Hopkins Medical School and Johns Hopkins Hospital. Following his training, he worked in clinical practice for 15 years in both academic and private practice in the United States. He has since led multiple teams for more than a decade in the pharmaceutical industry, overseeing drug development and medical affairs. Joining Dr. Kaufman today will be Mariska van Aswegen. She's the Vice President of Neurology for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. She has more than 20 years experience in the pharmaceutical industry in several treatment areas, such as central nervous system, cardiovascular, respiratory, women's health, and gastrointestinal, with roles ranging from commercial to regional divisional head. She has extensive experience in patient engagement and developing resources to support disease management beyond access to pharmaceutical treatment, one of which was included in curriculum of the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences at the University of Stellenbosch in Cape Town, South Africa. that was used to train medical students in behavioral change counseling to improve patient engagement and disease management. For the last 4 years, she's been working in Switzerland to lead the pre-launch and post-launch activities to bring Lupin's first orphan drug to market in Europe, working cross-functionally to implement research and development and clinical development plan to further develop existing treatment options in rare diseases with a focus on myotonic disorders. She holds a degree in pharmacology at an MBA specializing in executive management. And joining those two, we have Dr. Alla Zosulya-Weidenfeller. She is the Europe, Middle East, and Africa Medical Director at Lupin, and her experience ranges from developing new innovative treatments for multiple sclerosis in the United States and Switzerland to supporting the treatment of rare diseases in different therapeutic areas. As a young scientist, she received grants for research in neuroscience from Germany and a postdoctoral fellowship in the United States. She has more than 20 publications in numerous leading peer-reviewed journals such as PNAS and Nature Clinical Practice Neurology. She left research to join the pharmaceutical industry to bring her scientific background closer to the bedside, where a translational research could be applied to new treatment possibilities for patients. Ukrainian by birth, she has worked in the US, Germany, France, and Switzerland in academic and industry institutions in roles ranging from preclinical to clinical development to identifying potential use of existing medication to repurpose for patients suffering from rare diseases. Okay, if you have questions, many of you have submitted your questions in advance, which is greatly appreciated. But if you have questions for the Lupin team, you will use the drop-down menu in the chat box. So in GoToWebinar, you'll see that there's a chat box function. Use the drop-down menu and select Send Question to Staff. So if you don't select Send Question to Staff, they will not receive your question. So make sure to send question to staff, and then they'll get it. And those questions will probably be answered towards the end of the presentation. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us this beautiful Friday, and welcome, Lupin. Take it away.
Thank you, Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation, for giving us the opportunity to share some insights and some research and some work that Lupin Neurosciences have been doing in the recent years. Lupin's story goes 50 years back into the history by Dr. Desh Gupta, whose vision was to fight the life-threatening and infectious diseases and create the better world for everyone. His vision was basically to give people an affordable medicine. The name Lupin actually was inspired by the characteristics of the lupin flower that is actually capable to nourish and to grow in the often infertile soils that it grows. This inspiration is woven through the company's DNA today as we continuously drive the development of the solutions and providing the solutions to meet the patient's unmet medical needs of the society on a global scale. I say on a global scale because today Lupin is present really worldwide, and Lupin Neurosciences have successfully launched just a couple of years ago in Europe our first orphan, the drug in the specialty orphan designation. We are focusing on two specialty areas, namely the neurosciences in Europe and women health in US. And maybe something that you would be interested to learn is that about 10% of all our consolidated sales go back invested in the research and development. But let's look at I would like to share with you also the journey of the Lupin Neurosciences and how we were looking into meeting the unmet medical needs of the patients with non-dystrophic myotonia. Our story goes back to 2008, with Maxillatine being discontinued in Europe, and our interest in contributing meaningfully into the specialty care, and in particular in neurosciences, by collecting the feedback and insights from the key opinion leaders on the unmet medical need. So we have invested into the acquisition in 2015 and into collecting the data through the phase 3 on Maxillatine in non-dystrophic myotonia, and with our first orphan designation being granted in Europe and in US at a later time point, we have been looking into continuous investment into driving a continuous patient access with Maxillatine throughout Europe. So today, and I will talk about this later, we have several programs that are ongoing, and one of the programs that I will present later was on the Myopath survey, where we looked into the unmet medical needs of the patient. So having heard from the key opinion leaders and engaging with them and understanding or trying to understand better the unmet medical needs with long times to the diagnosis, long patient journey, the unawareness about the disease when we talk about the non-dystrophic myotonia, are the challenges that we face in dystrophic or myotonic dystrophy type 1, and a growing body of data and existing evidence as well on the Maxillatine as an anti-myotonic known by the key opinion leaders. We also engaged with the patients to better understand what their needs are and how Maxillatine can be safely used in this patient population to address the symptoms of the myotonia. So the study that we put in place was called Myopath, and it was aiming at understanding those unmet medical needs. We ran it 2 years ago, or a little bit more than 2 years ago by now, and we looked at how people who were impacted by the disease, by mostly myotonic disorders, were harmed due to a lack of access to Maxillatine. 19 countries were involved, mostly in Europe, because again, we were looking into the European situation, with the survey that was available in 15 languages. And of course, by the epidemiology data, more myotonic dystrophy type 1 and type 2 patients have participated, but we were in particular by that time also interested in patients with non-dystrophic myotonia, because the data are more clear and more well described in the literature, and the unmet medical needs in those patients have not been well described and well defined by the community. You can look at the data, or you can also ask us. We have presented the outcomes at the World Muscle Society last year on the outcomes of the survey. But it was also very clearly demonstrated that the people with myotonia were considerably harmed by the lack of access to the Maxillatine. And it became our mission, because while we have the approval for use of Namusclar, so the product Maxillatine, to manage the patient, the symptoms of the myotonia in non-dystrophic myotonia patients, the unmet medical need for myotonia management still exists in pediatric patient population, as well as in the DM1, as you know. Of course, and I have that in the backup. We can, when we have the discussion, we can have a look at the evidence. But today, Lupin has an extensive investigation plan to look at the safety and the efficacy of Maxillatine in 3 studies across all different age groups of the patients with myotonic disorders. So those will include both DM1 and non-dystrophic myotonia. We also have a post-authorization safety study, which is very common in Europe, and we're looking prospectively at Maxillatine benefits in these patients in terms of the safety, but also in terms of the patient-reported outcomes and what change that brings in for the quality of life of those people. The Myopath survey that I have just mentioned, and we also did an impact survey where as I said, the unmet medical need and the um, the impact of the burden of the disease in this patient group has not been properly described. So we've run 2020 and 21 an impact survey to delineate that also in Europe. And we did the Delphi consensus panel where the key opinion leaders could also contribute to their way of understanding where we stand with the treatment with Maxillatine and what data have been generated and how the natural history of disease look like so far. Of course, we also, looking into the DM1 space, we would like to better understand how the myotonia also impacts this patient group and how Maxillatine can be useful and beneficial, especially due to the previous history of the drug as an antiarrhythmic. And with the emphasis of myotonia being present in more than 80% of the overall DM populations, and how great the impact of myotonia on the patient quality of life is, it remains important to understand better how the what should be done to improve the management of myotonia in people who are affected with DM1. And so with all this as a background and also with all this information in mind, we have been also investigating recently the feasibility of a more suitable formulation of Maxillatine. And so we have entered also into this dialogue with the MDF and looking forward also to contribute meaningfully through this collaboration to the society and to people with DM. So we just put all these different factors here that have influenced our decision. And of course, this is nothing, absolutely new for people who know Maxillatine, are quite familiar with these aspects of the Maxillatine, that up to 30% of the patients would still experience the GI side effects due to Maxillatine. Of course, the cardiac involvement of the manifestation of the disease on itself can be aggravated by Maxillatine use. So it's also something very important to take into consideration when we plan a clinical study or when we look into improving the formulations of the molecule as well. But also making the molecule or the medication to be more friendly, to use it less frequent, as Maxillatine currently needs to be taken at least twice, if not 3 times a day for certain patients. And of course, for those patients with swallowing difficulties, swallowing the capsule, and for the children, of course, is something that represents a certain challenge in addition to burden of the disease that they experience. And so we've been, especially for the children, we were looking also into developing the formulations of different dosing of Maxillatine that already has gone into our clinical development. Right now, we're working on the clinical study to conduct in the patients with myotonic dystrophy type 1 and type 2, so combined across the both indications, to assess the efficacy and safety of Maxillatine short term and then extending into the longer duration, because from all the evidence and of course the discussions with different stakeholders, including the key opinion leaders, but also the patients, we understand that Maxillatine can be very beneficial, but to see the beneficial effect over the time beyond the 6 months and properly clinically monitor that and collect maybe systematically the patient-reported outcomes is something that has not been done in that scale. Of course, we are aware of the study that has been conducted in US, and we are building on that knowledge certainly. So we've been looking into a multi-center study in EU with currently with more patients than what has been planned in Rochester study. And we are connected with the key opinion leaders in Europe, but also in Canada and US to better understand how such a study needs to be designed to address those needs in these patients. So in terms of the timelines, maybe just a couple of words, and then again, we can come back to the slides once there will be questions. Right now, we continue working on the formulation within the research and development. Our research and development scientists are sitting in India. So of course, there was certain impact of COVID as well on our functions, but we keep driving the scientific advice, engaging with the key opinion leaders. We've driven the study, the pediatric study, to the point that we are ready to enroll the patients now in June. And of course, we are preparing the dystrophic, the Myotonia dystrophy type 1 study with Maxillatine in Europe. If all goes well, of course, we plan for a certain period of enrollment. And as you may be aware, of course, the regulatory approval is also something that certainly takes time. We just put some provisional timelines also for the US launch, and for the FDA application is around in 4 to 5 years. But again, we remain very optimistic that when we do all this research, that it will be with a better option of Maxillatine that has been known since a while, that can bring an additional benefit to the thank you very much for your attention. I have here the questions. If you don't mind, I will start answering them. Unless there are more burning questions than this. Well, there are just a couple of questions for to different sections. So on the trial, the question is whether a person who could be eligible for the clinical trial needs to have a full diagnosis with the genetic test. The answer is yes. We do need a confirmation of a genetic test. Today, it is not really a big challenge. I mean, you do need to be based probably for the moment, the way how the study is planned in Europe, but we're still, again, optimistic that maybe the situation will also allow us to extend over the ocean. But just for the purpose of this question, yes, you do need to have a confirmation of test confirming the DM1 or DM2. The question whether the same participant to be enrolled on Maxillatine study can also be enrolled or participate to a different trial for a drug that we are developing. We do not have, we continuously looking into other opportunities and picking up the developments in the biotech to bring that into our portfolio and help the biotechs and help with some seeding projects to accelerate the research, of course. But right now, so Maxillatine program in the neurosciences is our internal and our own biggest program at the moment. And in order to participate in this trial, we need to review that. I cannot say that for sure. It would probably depend on, but any comorbidities or any also additional involvement in another study may really jeopardize and bias the results of the trial. So normally this would not be allowed. But again, I do believe that everything needs to be looked into individual situation, but you probably have less chances to be enrolled in Maxillatine study if you already participate in another one. How can I prepare for clinical trials now? We will come to this question also. It is kind of reiterated also in the general questions as well. There is a lot of development in the field of the dystrophic or myotonic disorders in general. It's a really good news. There was a lot of science and research done and moved from preclinical into phase 1 and exploratory into proof of concept and going into the phase 2. I think it's good and healthy to stay on top of what's going on, but you are already a part of the MDF. And again, we are very, I would like to acknowledge again at this point also that we I'm very happy to be a part of this community and also bring our part on improving the awareness about the disease, improving with treatments, with new options for the patients, also new knowledge comes on board about the disease and about the treatment options. So I think, yeah, staying connected and keeping a dialogue to the patient organizations, to other peers and your healthcare providers would give you the best chances to be aware of what's going on in the DM space. What progress do you expect in the near 3 to 5 years on therapies for DM1 and DM2? If that is a general question, then I actually just quickly put something on my backup slides because it was a beautiful publication just this year at the beginning of 2021. And I think this busyness of the slide also gives you an idea the level of the developments and the number of the projects that have been running in the space of the myotonic disorders. I mean, we are talking from just some management of the disease for mobility, myotonia problems, to really disease modifying and gene therapies. Again, here erythromycin is a repositioned molecule as well, but you can see that across all the different phases of the development, it is still more crowded here in the preclinical space, but we are moving into phase 2 and into phase 3, and it needs to be acknowledged again that not every program gets to the application to FDA or EMA, but it is very encouraging that there are so many developments in the recent years, and I think especially in 3 to 5 years on therapies for DM1 and DM2, I see it very enthusiastically that there will be new therapies coming on the horizon. What is the most significant obstacle to producing a treatment for DM1 and DM2? Again, I am not a physician, I'm a scientist, but learning about the disease, what really strikes me is this complexity and the multi-systemic nature of the disease on itself, and the progression of the disease that in certain cases can be very unpredictable. It's this inconsistency of also of the symptoms, the challenges also to, once we have identified the right target to look into the therapeutic treatment of the disease, another challenge is really setting up and designing a clinical study that will aim at the endpoints that already somehow clinically validated, and that can tell us also something about the patient size of the group that we need to include into the clinical study to be able to demonstrate a treatment effect. Also the therapeutic range of different treatments that are required to maybe, if not cure the DM1, but at least change the course of the disease progression, is also another challenge. Identifying the therapeutic window, because if we talk even just about the myotonia, it comes at a certain period of the disease manifestation, or it can be different at different stages of life for different people. In childhood onset of DM1, it can be different to adult. Again, the genetics of the disease and the manifestation are significant obstacles of not only producing treatment, but really conducting clinical study. And this is, I believe, is one of the reasons, of course, as well, that today, after many years of researching in the space, we still making today some progress, but the steps are very careful. And again, if we look at the programs, for example, with an encouraging molecule that was in phase 2, tideglizib, there were certain challenges in the clinical trial running, which again speaks for the complexity of the disease and challenges that we will keep facing just by the nature of disease. COVID, whether it's been a distraction or slowing down our research, I cannot say that it wasn't. Of course, as I said, our research and also a lot of our functions are in India, and the country has been severely impacted by the COVID pandemic. Nemuscla and Maxillatine that we put on the market now for non-dystrophic myotonia is produced in Germany. So we could keep up with the supply and with all the work that needs to be done, also in terms of our work that we're doing to maintain and to also expand on patient access. However, of course, the clinical studies and our pediatric study and the preparation for the DM1 was something that did cost us and the patients, of course, some time today. We did have certain delays there. But then again, it may have gained us some more time to do the research on the formulation, and we keep being positive. What else can I do to improve my quality of life so that I can work and be productive until there is a treatment? Again, maybe a difficult question for me as a scientist to answer, and I cannot give any advice. Maybe we can also ask Greg to complement here. But I do want to say something that we have been looking into, and I think this is also something that we need to go in the pace of the developing technology. And one of the things that the pharmaceutical industry is also trying to contribute is beyond the pill services that we can provide on improving the clinical patient management through the development of applications or digital technologies that would help to better monitor the disease, to better capture the symptoms, maybe even improve the adherence to treatment that the physicians are proposing. So that is definitely, I do believe that the quality of life of people who are impacted by the myotonic disorders can be improved by the improvements of from the diagnosis to just improving patient care. And again, this is something that we are looking and will keep looking in the years to come. Thank you very much. These were the questions that we have received prior to the meeting. If there are any further questions, we are here to continue the dialogue, and to please do not hesitate to reach out and to ask your questions either here or also beyond the meeting.
So Alla, we have received a few questions in the question service on the platform. So I'll maybe just pose a couple of these to you and Greg, and we can answer these questions as best as possible. So the first one was in terms of myotonia, and the question was what criteria we would be using to are you using for myotonia? So that's what the question reads: is what criteria are you using for myotonia? So I guess it is you know, just a question in terms of how we would quantify myotonia. Right. So Alla, if you can give some insights into that.
Yes. So the severity of the myotonia is really, it's amazing because it's been assessed by neurologists and neuromuscular center specialists in a different way across the globe and also in Europe from center to center. The way how also the decision is taken to either prescribe something to manage myotonia better is very varying factor. But of course, the MRS scoring, where the patient is rated by the neurologist based on the presence of myotonia and the impact that it has on the daily activity, is something that is taking into account in setting up the our clinical study for dystrophy, for myotonic dystrophy type 1 and type 2 patients. Do you have something to add, Greg?
No, I mean, obviously the primary endpoint we're looking at is hand grip, so there needs to be a degree of myotonic, abnormal
Right.
myopathy in the hand. But other than that, that's primarily, where we're looking, with the caveat of the things that you were just speaking about. I don't have much to add on that.
Mm. Thank you. But yeah, mentioning hand grip myotonia is a good point. Yes. The hand grip myotonia needs to be present. That will be evaluated by the neurologist to decide whether that patient can be included in the study or not.
Greg, I'm going to pass this next question on to you. The question is, what has changed with this new version of Maxillatine that may decrease gastrointestinal side effects and cardiac side effects? So I know we still
I think some of it still, so some of this is still proprietary for sure. We're obviously looking at dosing, and we're looking at various different areas of absorption. But other than that, I really can't speak more to that. And I think ultimately it will come out as to what we see in the clinic. But we're clearly, we know these are important unmet needs, both with Maxillatine and of course with the underlying disease of DM itself. So we're trying to mitigate these as best we can in the study design and in the formulation development.
Thank you. I think the next question I can maybe just briefly answer is the question in terms of what centers in Canada will be included or involved in the clinical studies. And I think it's really premature for us, especially in the US and in Canada, to make any comment and give any indication in terms of which centers would be involved. As we progress with our development program, our research and development program, and then also the clinical development that would follow, we will gain more certainty in terms of the centers that would be involved in these studies. And then the last question that I'm going to perhaps pose to Alla, and I know, the initial study planned in Europe was with a current formulation of Maxillatine, and the inclusion and exclusion criteria are still to be, being defined, but this may also change depending on the outcome of our formulation development. But the question here is whether or not patients with pacemakers will be included in the trial. So I don't know if you can maybe have a quick comment on that.
We are closely working also with the cardiologist in Paris, who has a lot of experience on managing patients with also with treating them with Maxillatine, or being in consultancy with neurologists who decides to prescribe Maxillatine in these patients. And he has, over the years, he has collected quite encouraging data with being able to use Maxillatine also in patients who have had the pacemakers. So actually, we were not excluding those patients, right, Greg? We were not excluding them.
Yeah, I mean, we are working very closely with the cardiologist in particular around which patients would be appropriate, obviously, and which would not. But and there are a number of exclusions, mostly around significant cardiac disease. But other than that, we are trying to include as many patients as we can.
Yes, and the pacemakers can participate to the study, but again, it will be individually reviewed with the cardiologist who has experience in assessing this disease and using Maxillatine.
Good. I think that concludes our questions. Sorry, there's one more that popped in here. Let me quickly have a look. The question here is whether or not there are any other drugs that are being developed beside Maxillatine for DM. And I assume the question is in relation to the symptomatic treatment of myotonia. So, Alla, Greg, any comments?
I don't have more up-to-date information on that. Maybe Alla does.
Right. I mean, ranolazine is the molecule that came from Ohio University, from the lab, and went up to phase 2, assessing the myotonia in patients with, I do think it was dystrophic myotonia type 1. I don't know what current, because it kind of stayed within the academic area. Of course, no, the other antiarrhythmics to my knowledge, have not been taken into any clinical trials. There is an anti-epileptic, of course, lamotrigine, that has been studied in NDM, but never been assessed in other myotonic disorders. And so far I know, no plans of the RCTs. Maxillatine historically was just really considered as the most effective option for the patients with myotonia. Now, the reason why it was always been used with the great caution is the cardiac involvement, especially in the patients with DM1. So in terms of myotonia treatment, I'm not aware of any additional continuously growing generation of additional evidence, maybe just within the clinical practice, but not in a clinical setting with controlled randomized clinical trials.
Yes, I think the only other area that has been also very experimentally in research was, or preliminary research done was in the cannabinoids. But yes, that's still very early days in terms of whether or not those research would be continuing.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
That concludes the questions, unless there is any of the other participants and attendees that would like to pose any questions. As Alla said earlier, please feel free to forward any questions to the MDF. They will pass them on to us, and we would gladly answer if it is in our ability to answer those questions. But I think that concludes our presentation and our introduction to Lupin Neurosciences. And we would like to thank you for your time and your interest and to learn more about what we do and our activity and our interest in this space. And we hope to continue to work with the MDF and with people with myotonic dystrophy to really follow through with this research that we are doing and hopefully be in a position to bring an effective and a licensed anti-myotonic to the market soon.
Nice to meet all of you. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care.